Israel Beitenu leader Avigdor Lieberman issued this statement, quote, "Succumbing to terror in Gaza leads to terror attacks in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria." The government's current policy is a contemptible attempt to buy peace in the short term while sacrificing Israel's safety in the long term. For more on the impact of all this, let's bring in Eric Mandel, director of the Middle East Political Information Network. Eric, welcome. Israel is heading to elections in September, so throughout this entire day, we've seen reactions from Israeli lawmakers, which also carry a certain political message. Explain Avigdor Lieberman, ex-defense minister, a point of view. He doesn't like what Netanyahu's government is doing, what he calls managing the conflict.
Well, managing the conflict is basically what most Israeli leaders want, because they want the focus to remain on the north and Iran. And so this is not an existential conflict. It's terrible. We should grieve for any loss of life, especially an innocent young man carrying David Grossman books, returning to give them as presents to his rabbis for graduation. But to exploit the situation in a political campaign is not going to be a good idea. We could end up in a war that maybe Israel doesn't want or is ready for. So that, I think, is the biggest challenge. How Abbas will explain this, because he's been asking for a popular resistance, which basically is inciting people. He's created an economic catastrophe there by not taking any Israeli tax monies. So, and then he's like somebody who kills their parents and says, now I'm an orphan, feel bad for me. He has decided not to take any money. So the conditions there for this to blow up, either to another intifada or to turn into another Gaza war, really plays right into the hands of Hamas.
You mentioned Abbas, and it's interesting, the deadly attack in the West Bank took place a day after a delegation of Democratic congressmen met with President Abbas in Ramallah. And, you know, Israeli right-wing lawmakers, they say that Abbas is directly responsible for such attacks. Is that a view that you share?
Well, he has created an environment for incitement. And he's very careful how he uses words. He doesn't say armed resistance, he'll say popular resistance. But popular resistance is heard amongst especially...
Resistance is the term used by Hamas.
Well, the resistance is the term used by Palestinian Authority, Fatah, and PLO, but popular resistance. He plays semantics there. So I think he has created a climate here. He's also been talking about breaking off any connection with Israel's security, which would be a death sentence for him. So Hamas loves what's going on here because it will strengthen them.
We don't yet know exactly who is behind this murder, but is it either way empowering Hamas in Gaza?
Well, Hamas's response has been this was a natural response, that this was heroic. So whether Palestinian Islamic Jihad takes responsibility, the chances are it's either Hamas inspired, or it could be a lone wolf. But again, and Israeli intelligence can work against Hamas cells. In fact, July was an incredibly busy month for Israel going into the West Bank and capturing Hamas cells.
Usually when we talk about violence between Palestinians and Israeli security forces, we focus here our conversation on the Gaza border. But now, and it's not the first time this year that we are talking on the West Bank, what does it tell you about Israel's deterrence there?
Well, I think Israel's deterrence is pretty good. There's not a day that goes by that Israel doesn't foil a few potential terrorist attacks. There was one just this past week that could have been a real disaster. And they work quietly with the Palestinian Authority for their own interests, because if Israel was not there, the Palestinian Authority would be weak, they would fall, it would become Hamastan.
And what about prospects of peace?
Well, peace is an interesting word. What you really want to do in this part of the world at this time is lower the flames. You have to I just wrote a piece for the Jerusalem Post about this for the freshman congressmen that are there. And basically what we really need to do is think about the status quo as the best situation that is at this point of time. And Abbas has himself to blame for anything else.
Eric Mandel, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time.